Tired of feeling tired? Done with diet culture? Overwhelmed by conflicting nutrition and fitness messages? Then join us, your hosts of the Nutrition Revolution podcast, as we take a deep dive into all things women's fitness and nutrition. I'm Kimberly.
And I'm Tabitha. And together we are debunking diet culture myths and giving you the tools you need to finally see the results you're looking for.
All right, today we're going to talk about carbohydrates and the role that it plays in our body. But before we start talking about the importance of carbohydrates, let's start talking about some of those myths that we grew up with in the low carb lifestyle. Yeah. What kind of myths did you grow up believing?
I think the biggest one is eating carbs makes fat or you'll gain weight.
Right.
Weight gain is synonymous with eating carbs.
Right.
And that weight loss is synonymous with cutting carbs.
Right.
So
there's that Atkins lifestyle of you have to cut out all the carbs if you want to lose weight. And
also that fruit has too much sugar in it, that you can't eat fruit because it has sugar and the sugar is bad and sugar
goes straight to your hips.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I think that I still have clients who come to me and say, am I allowed to eat fruit? Am I allowed to eat bread? Or, I make sourdough bread. That's the big thing right now. Can I still eat a healthy diet and enjoy my sourdough bread? Can I still enjoy life and eat food with carbs being a part of it? Because I think that a lot of us grew up believing that carbohydrates are bad for your body, and that for women in particular, because I don't think men really kind of dealt with the carb craze like we were raised. I think that it was more of like women shouldn't eat so many carbs because that's what makes you gain weight.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, diet culture is very much targeted at women.
Yeah. And so I think that for me, I still have clients who come to me with those carbohydrate issues and concerns. So when I tell them I want your plate to look like eating maybe 35% carbs with each meal, they're like, whoa, that's a lot. And they get nervous to actually eat some carbs. So they'll be surprised when I eat some gluten-free bread, or I know you like your sourdough bread. They're surprised when they see our meal plans or whatever, including carbohydrates like bread.
Yeah,
that's still shocking for them.
That you can eat bread. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the things that I do hear from clients a lot. It's like, you look like you eat bread like regularly. You have bread, you have pasta, you're eating fruit. And I'm like, yeah, those are all part of a healthy, balanced diet. And you need the carbs. I mean, the more active you are, the more carbs you need to fuel that activity, to make sure that you're going to have the body composition that you want, that you're going to have the energy that you want too. And people don't realize how that carbohydrates are the gas in the tank. And for everything, I'm not talking about just like your high intensity workout or your hour-long boot camp or your Orange Theory class. Like it's carbs, gas in the tank for brain function, having normal cognitive function and energy as well. So yeah, you do need the carbs. And I do feel like there's always a lot of resistance when I first give clients a macro plan, or they start seeing like what a balanced diet is going to look like for them and what balanced meals looks like. They're always so shocked by how many carbs are in that. And I do think that initially the question is always, are you going to have me cut carbs? Like, it's not so much the question, the assumption. That's the right word.
That is a good, it is the assumption
is that working with a nutritionist equates to, you're going to tell me to not eat carbs ever, and we're going to go down that path, because it seems like we're like have been indoctrinated largely to believe that is the only path forward towards not even just, if you're someone that like, maybe you're like, I'm totally fine with my body composition. Like I'm good there. I just want like general nutrition help. It's like, that just seems to be the path that everybody assumes is the way to improved health, is low carb.
So what do you think demonized carbs? Like, why do you think that has become, I feel like it's particularly our generation, is the demonization of carbohydrates, where like my grandmother or my mom, it was fats. So for us, I feel like carbs have been the path.
Yeah.
What do you think?
So, I mean, I love nutritional nutrition epidemiology, and you have to go back in time a little bit to around the 1970s when the medical community came out saying, look, we have found out that eating fat leads to weight gain, and eating fat leads to cardiovascular disease. So the low fat craze was ushered in the 70s, and all fat was removed.
Low fat skim milk.
Yes, fat was removed from pretty much all of our packaged products on the shelves. And what happened was when you take away fat, you take away flavor. Mm-hmm. So things weren't tasting as good, manufacturers, when they're producing their foods. And so they started adding in sugar to help bring back that taste. So the pendulum swung from being, balanced to there was an imbalance where now all of a sudden things are really low fat, but then they're way higher carb, but it's sugar.
Right.
It's a refined,
processed,
simple carbohydrates. And then after about 20 or so years of this, all of a sudden come into the 90s, and we're having continued epidemic of weight gain, of overweight and obesity in this country, and it's trending, higher all the time. And so nutritionists and the medical community is looking at this, trying to figure out why. And then it's like, oh, well, there's so many carbohydrates. Like, the average American is eating, a lot of carbs. It's the carbs. And so then the pendulum swung the other direction. Yeah. And now it was like fat wasn't so much of a problem as it's the carbs and these simple refined carbs. And so if you just cut them out, you're going to lose weight.
Right.
And I think that had a lot to do with how we got to this point where carbs have been demonized, or like carb phobia has taken over, because then diet culture and mainstream media is jumping on that in every magazine, touting the benefits of eating low carb, that you're going to lose weight, and all that. It kind of just spirals.
I think too, if you look at some of these scientific studies, and if you're a nerd and read scientific journals like me, you have to think about what they're comparing them to also, right? Like if you take a low carb diet compared to a standard American diet, of course you're going to see results. It's going to be drastically different.
You're usually cutting out like the processed junk foods.
Right.
Like people also think like junk food is synonymous with carbohydrates, and that's
which is not true.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that though, because I think that is one of the things so what is a carb? That's what we want to kind of talk about, and what kind of roles do carbs play in our body. So I know that when we eat carbohydrates, I know for like a lot of my clients who are endurance athletes who are running races and triathlons, and they, are just moving their bodies all the time, their carb count is super high because their body is just burning through that really, really fast. So I always have them eat a lot of carbs for recovery, for just in general brain fog and performance, and it plays such a huge role in our bodies. So I think that people don't realize that your body needs carbohydrates for just overall function. Like it is just, that's why it's a macronutrient, right?
Yeah.
Your body can't survive without carbohydrates.
Yeah, I mean, and if you look at what the acceptable macronutrient distribution range is, it's 45 to 65% of your total calories
should be carbs.
Coming from carbohydrates. So that's really on the low end. It's about half of your intake of calories coming from carbohydrate. What the difference is what does that carbohydrate look like? Mm-hmm. Right, the quality of your carbohydrate, and then balancing that with your activity levels. What are your goals? What's your body composition, your age, your gender? All of those things are going to impact how much carbohydrate you need and when you need it as well. I always tell my clients, carbs are the gas in the tank. So if you want energy, and I don't even mean just for exercise, just throughout your day. If you want, long-lasting energy throughout the day, if you want to not deal with brain fog, and just feel good, like you need to put gas in the tank. Right. You need to put carbs in to give you the energy that you need for all of the demands of your life, not just exercise, but running around your kids to and from wherever they're going, like all of your activities of daily living, your job, everything.
Yeah. So I think that the carbohydrates, are the fuel that your body needs to run. Your body is burning that up very fast. So you have to have those carbs to function in general. And then as a female, we've talked a bit about having our different cycles and the different phases. So I see a lot of times when we're on our cycle, you might be craving more of the, breads and pastas and cookies.
Simple carbs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of people freak out because they're like, oh my gosh, like I can't eat this stuff. And so then you're miserable when you're on your cycle because you feel like you can't eat those. And kind of the same thing with when my clients are sick, when they get a cold or they, I saw it a lot with COVID that a lot of my clients wanted bread or like crackers or things like that during when they were sick. And my response to them was eat it. Like your body is doing such an amazing job at telling you what it needs. Mm-hmm. And there are nutrients in some of those carbohydrates. It doesn't mean you have to eat tasty cakes and, but you can eat some good sourdough bread, or you can eat some good homemade things that give you the carbohydrates that you need in a healthier way. Sourcing matters when it comes to carbs, but your body is actually designed to tell you what it needs. So if you're sick or you're on your cycle and you're like, I feel like I need something, more of those carbohydrates, you should eat them. Like, don't be afraid to enjoy them and eat them and make them part of your, life. And so for me, I think it's those myths of I can't have carbs because those are what make me fat. People are still afraid to enjoy those carbs.
Carb phobia is real.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Definitely is. And I think that is usually the first thing that I have to start tackling with clients, with the women that I work with. Usually two things. One, just like eating more
in general.
Like the concept of just eating more, putting more calories in their body and on their plates is just terrifying to most women. And then also, increasing based on like whatever their activity levels are and their current goals, adjusting their carbohydrate accordingly. I would say, I don't know about you, but I feel like 9 times out of 10, it's always increasing the carbs. I mean, rarely have I had an active client that's like, oh no, you're way overeating on your carbs. I'm not saying it hasn't ever happened, but that's actually the exception. Most women aren't getting enough carbs and enough total calories. So that's kind of the first things to start tackling or working with them on is their mindset around carbs. And I think, I don't know how you feel about it, but I feel like education is the root here.
Absolutely.
Understanding like what are carbs and then what are the role of carbs in the body. So aside from just energy production and fuel for your workouts, I mean, carbohydrates are involved in
glycogen storage.
Yes. Glycogen storage in the muscle. It's a storage form of energy in the body. Yeah. So glycogen in your muscle and your liver, brain function, like we mentioned earlier. I don't know if I mentioned this or not, but like the average adult brain needs 100 to 130 grams of glucose a day just for like normal function. Like we're talking like basic normal function. So if you're someone that is carb phobic and always worried about eating carbs or eating less of them, but yet you feel like you're constantly tired, that you have brain fog, that you have issues with your memory, that you can't remember things, like I would say that maybe eating such low carb could be a part of the problem, and try increasing carbs, but make sure that too, when you're increasing the carbs, like the quality of the carb too. We're not sitting here saying like, yes, rush out and go get a half dozen donuts.
Right. Well, I think there's that.
Awesome.
There are multiple types of carbs. So you have your simple carbs that are literally the junk food. It's mostly, sweets and sugars and
your baked goods.
And they have their time and their place.
Absolutely.
But we want the complex carbs, the fruits and the, whole grain sources and, some of those starchier, veggies, things
potatoes, even white potatoes.
Yeah. I mean, I absolutely love sweet potatoes, and they're a regular part of our like weekly eating, and
brown rice, even white rice. I mean, whole food carbohydrates. So your fruits, your veggies, your nuts and seeds, all of your whole grains, all of your breads that are made with whole grain. That is one thing when it comes to bread. I do try to work with clients on like
Sourcing.
Having bread, but yeah, the sourcing of it. Like, look for something that is a little less refined, that's going to have some whole grain flours in there to give you some fiber and protein and the complex carbs. But also, when you are eating that way, you're going to be making sure that you're getting the vitamins and minerals that your body needs.
I think that, so one of my intakes for my clients is, have you ever lost weight before? And when you did lose weight, what were you doing to lose the weight? And a lot of my female clients say, when I wasn't eating as many carbs, I lost more weight. My issue with that, I guess not my issue, but my education part of that is, when you were low carb, you were making better choices on your food. So you weren't eating a bag of chips. You were going home and making meals.
Yes.
You were not just grabbing whatever, was on the table in the lunchroom, or you weren't just eating cake at birthday parties. You were paying attention. All right, I'm paying attention to what I'm eating. So I'm making choices that are going to be less carbs. So less you naturally are cutting out all the processed food. Yeah. And in doing so, that's what's making you lose weight. It's not necessarily the carbs that are the enemy. It's the types of carbs that you're consuming. When you're eating those simple carbs, your body isn't knowing what to do with all of that extra sugar.
Well,
it's storing it as fat.
You end up with the simple carbs. You end up with those spikes in your blood glucose levels, your blood sugar levels, and then that extra circulating glucose that doesn't get used up by your muscles, because if you're not
hanging out,
exercising, it's going to end up being stored as fat. To your point, when you were saying that, like, it's not necessarily that they were cutting carbs, it was that they were just eating better. I think that is so important to hit home. Instead of just grabbing like a muffin and a latte for breakfast, or skipping breakfast altogether, they were having like eggs and a smoothie, avocado toast,
conscious eating efforts,
oats or overnight oats, like Greek yogurt with berries and granola. Like, you were eating really nutrient dense whole foods where you were getting a balance of all the nutrients that you needed. You were getting more complex carbs than probably ever before, and then your body responds favorably. It actually didn't have anything to do with the carb. It had to do with the quality of the diet and cutting out more of the junky, what I call like high calorie, low nutrient foods, and replacing them with nutrient dense foods that, ironically enough, are usually always lower in calorie.
Right.
One thing too that I like to point out, that carbs and protein have the same calories per gram. It's four calories per gram of carb or protein. Now, yes, protein is going to be a little more difficult to digest. More energy is required from the body to digest it. So you have that like thermic effect of food.
Right.
But complex carbohydrates, the ones that are going to be rich in fiber, so like your all natural from the earth type carbs, right? We're talking your fruits, your veggies, your whole grains, your nuts and seeds. Like, they also have a thermic effect from digestion because of breaking down of that fiber. So again, complex versus simple is really at the root of the quality of your carbohydrate. As we're talking about quality of carbohydrate, what would you tell our listeners? What do we mean by that?
So when it comes to the quality of the carbs, I always say pick your complex carbs first. And complex carbs being fruits and vegetables and, some of these really good whole grain options that, the sourdough breads or the whole grain breads,
brown rice,
white rice. I don't really care which rice you pick. And, getting in those first. And then when it comes to our simple carbs, those kind of have a time and a place, right? So if we are, if the goal, let's say your goal is weight loss. If you're eating simple carbs more than you're eating the complex carbs, you're not going to see the weight loss as much, simply because those simple carbs are way more caloric than those complex carbs. You're eating cakes and donuts and things. They taste good, so it's harder to stop eating them, right? Where if you're sitting with like a bowl of rice versus a bag of chips,
oatmeal with nuts and seeds,
right? You're going to naturally eat more of the chips because they taste good, rather than the rice where eventually you're just going to get filled with it. So if your goal is weight loss, or you're not going to eat as many as the complex carbs as you would sitting down eating like a bag of simple carbs. So
And simple carbs are going to be like the processed refined
Processed,
stuff. It's going to
refined.
be your white sugar. It's going to be your white pastas, or, pasta that's made with white flour, I guess I should say, like white breads, the things that have been more
refined.
Heavily,
it's the refined
exactly,
carbs.
refined and processed. So all of your traditional junk foods are going to be in that simple carbohydrate camp. Right. And so when we say complex, we're talking more whole foods.
And this is why they use that, rather than going low carb, go around the perimeter of the grocery store.
Yeah.
Right. So that's your quick, easier way to do it. So rather than saying, I'm going to eat a low carb diet, no, I'm going to eat a whole foods diet,
I agree,
where I'm
100%.
shopping the perimeter of the grocery store. So all of those things are going to be less refined. You might find random things, but for the most part, you're eating those whole foods from the produce section. You're getting good veggies and fruits. You're not going in and getting those packaged things. And when we're eating those simple carbs, they have the oils and the fats and the sugars. And so it's just making it more addicting and more, you're going to want to eat more of it. So
also though too, fats are higher in calories. So if you take a donut, it's actually got a lot of fat in it. So it's going to make it higher calorie, but then it's also the simple refined carbs. It's your white flour, it's your sugar. So it's higher, it's energy dense, meaning high calorie, but it's nutrient poor, meaning there's not a whole lot of nutrition in it.
Right.
I'm not sitting here vilifying donuts. You can eat a donut.
Time and a place.
Exactly. You can fit it in. And I mean, if you know me, you know that I freaking love donuts.
I mean, it is in Delaware. If you are a local, it is Pfeiffer's donut season. We're over here eating apple cider donuts if you can do it, right?
So yeah. So it is going to be a lot of the times there's going to be higher fat, higher carb, but it's the refined carbs. So it's going to be higher calorie, but low nutrient density to those foods, which are going to ultimately end up not satisfying you as long.
Right.
So then all of a sudden you have a super simple carb rich meal. And then you're wondering why an hour and a half, 2 hours later, you're really hungry.
I see this a lot with people who for breakfast eat a muffin and a coffee. And then they're like, I'm so hungry. And that's
2 hours later and I have a headache.
Yeah. It's because your body, it probably wasn't even enough carbs that your body, it still needs more energy.
And you also get the blood glucose, the blood sugar spikes too, by doing that. You're not there's no protein and no fiber in there to help delay gastric emptying and stabilize the release of glucose. That's the blood sugar into your bloodstream. So you're getting this massive spike in your blood sugar and then a crash that follows it. So yeah, you do. You end up all of a sudden feeling exhausted a little while later, a little more moody. You have a headache versus if you're really wanting that muffin and that latte, get some egg bites, go with it. Get some hard-boiled eggs, a protein
have a couple
shake,
pieces of bacon.
Yeah, something, I don't know, even a chomp stick or beef jerky or Greek yogurt, with it.
Just eat some protein with your carbs.
Yeah, get some protein in there.
Yeah.
And then if you can, add in a plant food serving to give you a little bit of fiber and the complex carbs. And with that, you'll also be getting the vitamins and minerals that you need. So making it work, nutrition by addition.
Yes. So I really, thinking about carbs and talking to clients, I always tell them, focus on complex carbs. If you work out, eat carbs before you work out. Do you say the same?
Yes,
you
absolutely.
Carbs before you work out?
I will say too, I give a sliding scale. So if you're just going to be doing strength training, I usually tell my clients to focus more on protein with a little bit of carb. If you're going to be doing, if it's a cardio day or if you're training for an event, a race or something, or you're just someone that really loves cardio, then you're going to need more carbohydrate before and after.
Yeah. So I think that's a good point. It kind of depends on what you're doing in your workout. So think endurance and high intensity, getting that heart rate up. If your heart rate's going to be elevated, you want to have more elevated carbs. So some of the good carbohydrates that I have my clients eating, fruit. I love fruit.
Yeah.
Eat fruit.
Fruit has too. I want to just pause for a second. Okay. The sugar in fruit, fructose, is not the same as white sugar, as table sugar. And there's this other little thing called fiber that is in fruit that delays gastric emptying, and then the vitamins and minerals that eating fruit provides, not to mention just like the antioxidants from the different colors of fruits, like the skin and the apple and the berries, those
What's
colors.
those micronutrients
Yes,
that your body needs? We talk a lot about macros. We'll do an episode on micronutrients because I think that, eat the rainbow. You've got to eat all these different varieties to get in all of those little nutrients. Yeah.
For antioxidants and for vitamins and minerals and all the things that your body needs just as much as it needs of the protein, fats, and carbs.
So when you're eliminating complete
food groups,
you're losing, you're missing out.
It's an opportunity. Yeah. It's an opportunity to fuel your body and give it what it needs.
Yeah. For me on the gluten-free diet side, it's a little tougher.
Right.
So I tend to not really do a lot of grains. Every once in a while we'll do some corn.
So what are some of your top grains since you're gluten-free and I'm new to the gluten-free life and really just because of my daughter. So we're like a hybrid gluten-free family. I cook pretty much gluten-free because I'm not cooking a whole bunch of different things.
Yeah.
But like my husband, my son and I, like we're not impacted by the gluten. So I'm curious, like what are your
so we don't do a lot of grains at all, actually. I'm not really like we don't do a lot of bread, very rarely. And then if we do, it's like a really not great nutrient gluten-free bread that we'll have as like a alternative.
What flours do you use?
So we just use like this like rice flour.
Okay, rice flour. Yeah, I've been experimenting. So the sourdough that I make is a whole grain. I use superfine oat flour, sorghum, and I have millet in there, and then buckwheat.
Okay.
Buckwheat. That's
buckwheat.
What it is. Yeah.
Hey,
so
buckwheat.
It's buckwheat. Yeah. Ground whole buckwheat flour, whole ground oats. I use brown rice flour actually.
Yep.
So this like sourdough, I mean, it's super high fiber and protein.
Which is awesome. Yeah.
When you have, we are bigger bread eaters. Like we love that. And I've always been big on like the whole grains, like using, hard winter wheat, ground whole grain, ground wheat, brown rice, mainly for the addition of fiber and protein.
Right.
There's more fiber and protein in brown rice than in white rice or white flour, whole wheat flour versus white flour.
Yeah.
So that is something I think if you love breads, just look at the quality of the ingredients and try to go for whole grain as much as possible for those that don't have to live the gluten-free life. And even if you do live gluten-free, like there's a lot of options.
We do a lot of sweet potatoes, a lot of white potatoes. My son really loves rice.
Wait, what?
So we'll do rice.
I thought those are
white
bad for
potatoes are so good. They just taste so delicious.
And I tell people too, they actually have a lot of fiber in them.
Yeah.
The oligosaccharides, which are your complex long chain carbohydrates, like white potatoes have those.
Yeah, they're a complex carb, not a simple carb.
Yep, they are a complex carb, exactly.
So, so we just don't really do a lot of none of us are big pasta people, so we don't really do a lot of pasta.
Okay, we're big pasta people too, but I do a lot of like whole wheat pasta. Although truthfully, now being gluten-free pasta to me is just kind of like meh.
Yeah.
Like it's not as great.
It's not worth it. Chickpea pasta, it gets sticky and gummy and...
Because I would say, big pasta people, I would say every other week I would make some sort of like a dish that had pasta in it. I would always use whole grain pasta, whole wheat pasta, so there's more protein and fiber, and that's more of a minimally processed. But living the gluten-free life, they just haven't quite mastered the gluten-free pasta yet. A lot of other things.
Yeah, so we have to try to get in our carbohydrates with lots of fruits and lots of veggies, and then seeds. Nuts and seeds, and
like
so
steel cut oats or anything?
In the last couple of years, we've started adding in gluten-free oats, and so my husband and my son really. They love oats, and I'm just not really like a big fan of oats, but it works for them.
The taste texture.
My daughter and I are like, give us sweet potatoes all day.
Yeah.
And they're like, we'll take oats. And so it kind of works for us. Yeah. So for their breakfasts and stuff, they'll do oatmeal or overnight oats. And then my daughter and I are like, we'll take fried potatoes, like the air fryer potatoes. Okay. And so it works. But all right, let's talk about carbohydrates in like recommendations. So women specifically, if you're an active female, meaning like you walk and you move a little bit, not necessarily like working out every single day, but just a female who functions and moves her body, like what recommendation are we generally giving for carbs there? Do you say like 200, 250 just to basic female function?
Yeah. For an adult, I would say that that's a good, I mean, again, I think I mentioned earlier, like 100 to 130 grams just for basic cognitive functioning. So fuel for your brain. And then you have to add in some extra for, even if you're not someone that's intentionally exercising regularly or at all, you're still moving. Like your body, you're going up and down stairs, you're getting up and down from sitting, you're walking to the mailbox, whatever it might be. So yeah, I would say anywhere like 175, 200-ish.
Yeah, usually I say about 200 grams female, for just like an average female, maybe who sits at a desk most of the day, but takes her dogs for walks after. And then for my endurance athletes, my endurance female athletes are getting about 350 to 400 grams a day.
Yeah, I would say definitely. You said it for your endurance athletes?
For my endurance, yeah. These are my runners, and these are my people who are training for marathons and half marathons. And
you're going to need, absolutely.
Yep. And then I know when I was pregnant, for me, it was my carbs were higher just because you're building a baby. Yeah. You know, you're creating a baby, so your body is burning through a lot. So say when I was pregnant, it was probably 250 to 300 grams. Not range. Insanely high, not like I was running a marathon, but usually probably around that 300 range was what I was doing. And then, so I kind of am like a plate builder with my clients. So I like to look at when we have these breakfasts or, I'm a meal 1, meal 2, meal 3 kind of person. When you're building your plate, you need to look at your plate as macronutrients. So you have your proteins, your fats, and your carbohydrates. For my clients, those carbohydrates are going to be the biggest percentage on their plate.
Yes, agreed. Same. I pretty much break it down. Protein and plants is the way that I like to Which plants simplify.
Are carbohydrates.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. And having a combination of fruits, veggies, whole grains, and then focusing on the protein and your fat sources. I mean, like if you're a meat eater, you're going to be getting some fat that way. And when you're eating whole grains, you're getting like unsaturated fats, especially if you're having like nut butters, nuts and seeds, whole grains. And then what you're cooking into is going to be a fat source, dairy products. But ultimately, yes, I would say at least half your plate is going to be plant foods, your carb sources. Yeah. And maybe even more, maybe even like up to 3/4, depending on
what you're doing that day.
Are. Yeah, exactly. If you're an endurance athlete, if you're, doing like you're the cardio queen, you'd probably be more to that like 2/3, 3/4 part of your plate.
Awesome. Well, okay. Let's kind of recap what we went through here, because carbohydrates can be a lot. And so we kind of talked about the myths of, you can't eat carbs to lose weight. You can eat carbs to lose weight. You need carbs.
You need, like, full stop. Women need carbs. Full stop.
We need carbs. Not eating carbs is not a fix for your lifestyle. That. It's also not the only pathway to lose weight. And fruit does not make you fat. And if you go to someone who says, quit eating fruit and then you'll lose weight, you should run.
Okay. So story time.
Yeah.
A couple years ago, I walked into this like nutrition shop and they had like all these smoothies, and I was like, I was like really hungry and I wanted something that was going to have like protein and whole foods, and so I go in there and I'm like reading all these smoothie, and they had like brownie batter smoothie, and I started thinking, I'm like, I don't think this is what I think that it is. Then I was like looking at some of the strawberry banana and the different ones, and so I asked the guy, I'm like, asking about the ingredients, and basically, long story short, I said, well, so are you actually using like whole fruits and veggies? And he looked at me like I had 4 heads, and he's like, no. He's like, we don't use any fruit at all. And I was like, well, why not? And he goes, well, because of the sugar, we want to keep the sugar down low. And I literally like jaw on the floor. I'm like, I wanted to just turn and
but
run
they had
away.
Brownie batter.
But I'm like, so basically it was all just like powder.
Chemicals.
It was all just it was just like
just
powdered
chemicals
greens,
that taste.
powdered all the things. And so
it's so dangerous.
I was like, okay, well, I'll think about it. I'll be back. And I wasn't
run.
back.
Good job for running.
I did not go back, but that is, I think, like a perfect example of how people are terrified of fruit. And
that's still happening.
Like, it's not the same.
It's just frustrating that
or response.
It's just frustrating that those are happening. It's misinformation being spread, and it's profiting off of women's insecurities and misinformation that is marketed towards women.
Yeah.
Fruit does not make you fat.
Fruit's super good for you.
It's
so healthy. It's a great
Yeah.
carbohydrate source. It tastes good. There's awesome vitamins and minerals in fruits and antioxidants. Like
Right.
there is room on your plate for fruit.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay, recap. You have to eat carbs.
Yeah, you need carbs. Quality of carb matters most. So trying to balance the complex with the simple. So again, your complex are going to be all of your whole foods. Your simple carbs are going to be more of your junky, processed, fun carbs is how I like to describe it. So just striking that balance, but making sure that most of your carbs are going to come from those complex sources.
Focus on the perimeter of that grocery store, getting in things like sweet potatoes and fresh fruit, even frozen fruit, and using those whole grain sources if your body can tolerate it, like wild rice, quinoa, oats, and then even things like corn and beans and lentils. You can have those too.
Oh yeah, I forgot about beans. This whole time we're saying fruits, veggies, whole grains, nuts and seeds. Yeah, legumes.
Yeah,
can't forget about those.
Yeah, beans,
are
lentils.
Very high protein, very high fiber, complex carbohydrate source. Just to point out too, like fiber is a complex carb. It's a carbohydrate. It's a complex carb. That is what is in your whole fruits and veggies, nuts and seeds, whole grains, and legumes, your beans. And you need fiber for gut health and also to help increase your satiety with your meals. So when you eat something that has fiber in it, you're going to feel fuller longer.
Yeah.
And you have more stable blood sugar response to that food. So if nothing else has stuck with you or resonated, we hope that your takeaway will be that you need carbs. You need carbohydrates in the diet. Focus on whole unprocessed carbs as much as possible. So fruits and veggies, whole grains, nuts and seeds, legumes, that's your beans. Make that, half to 3/4 of your plate. Shop the perimeter of the grocery store. And moral of the story is eat your carbs.
Yeah. I think don't be afraid of carbohydrates and try to, if anything, I would say start eating carbs. Pay attention to your body, see how they feel, see how adding in maybe 200, 250 grams of carbohydrates makes you feel, and start taking notice that carbs probably are making you feel better, giving you more energy, less brain fog, and just helping you throughout the day. So, really kind of bust that myth by actually trying it. And if you do try it, let us know and tell us how it's working for you, because I think that the more women who eat those carbs and who aren't afraid of those carbs, if they can share their stories of how carbs have helped them, it's going to help break those myths even more, so that future generations are going to be like, nope, carbs work. We're allowed to eat them.
Breaking down barriers one carbohydrate at a time.
That's right.
Yeah. So eat carbs, be happy.
Yay. I love it. All right. We will see you next time.
Bye. Thanks for spending your time with us. If you found this podcast helpful, we would love for you to share it with your friends and family. And don't forget to subscribe on your podcast platform. If you have nutrition or fitness questions you want answered on future episodes, we would love to hear from you. You can submit these questions to our email, Thenutritionrevolutionpodcast@gmail.com, and follow us on Instagram @TheNutritionRevolutionPodcast.